ladies and gentlemen, to the She Knows Pro Football podcast. Once again, I'm Alice, aka the NFL Girl, and once again, I got my good friend Dominick here with me. Dominick, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty good, Alice. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas and you're going to have a good New Year's. You know, we had a week 17 of COVID R Us. We don't know what's going to expect this week. Had a lot of weird decisions last week with, Houston beating Los Angeles and everything. So let's see what we're going to do this week with the wheel of COVID.
Now, the upside, you guys, is we do not have any Thursday night games. Hallelujah. We are down to the part of the season where we only have our Sunday and our Monday games. I'm so happy about that. So we got to get it started with our morning slate of games. Let's get started with the 7-8 Atlanta Falcons headed to Buffalo to face the 9-6 Bills. Dominick, who you got?
The Falcons are 7-8, but they're a terrible 7-8. They've never won a game by more than one possession, and they have the second worst point differential in the entire NFL behind the Detroit Lions. They're minus 122 in point differential. They're just a terrible team. If they don't win small, they lose big, and I think they're going to lose this one big against Buffalo. They're 15-point underdogs, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be about what the margin is.
I have to agree with Dominick here. Falcons are, how they're 7-8 is baffling. They win some close games. Again, this is one of these teams where it's Younghoe Koo that keeps them in games because they have such a good kicking game, but their defense is garbage. Their offense really hasn't produced the way that you would expect a team in the NFC South to produce, and in particular having a dual threat player like Cordell Patterson there. I'm not expecting anything good out of them. I do not expect them to make the playoffs. Buffalo, meanwhile, they show that when their back's against the wall, they can get the wins, appreciate everything they're doing, and they are fighting to stay atop of that AFC East. So, therefore, got to give this to the Bills. They're going to come in there ready and fired up to whoop all over these Falcons. Next up, we got the 4-11 New York Giants headed to Chicago to face the 5-10 Bears. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, it's the last game we had one good team against one bad team. This time we have one bad team against one worse team. So it just depends on who's going to play for Chicago. We do think it's going to be Nick Foles. He looked really good last week, leading them back in Seattle. I think he's going to be able to do the same thing again here. We're pretty sure it's going to be Mike Glennon on the other side with the New York Giants. Obviously, the best player on the field is most likely going to be Saquon Barkley, but even he is taking a big step back, and he's not what everybody thinks he is. So it could possibly even be David Montgomery in this one, who I think is going to have a really, really good game here. I think they're going to want to run the ball. They're going to keep it short to him. They're going to use Darnell Mooney a little bit in the deep pass. They'll use Jimmy Graham as well, like they did last week to get that final touchdown. And I just think they're going to be able to go up and down the field on the Giants. The Giants aren't going to be able to stop them. Their defense has not been as good. Their offensive line is absolute trash. So I think the Bears defense finally getting back to full health. They didn't have any of their secondary players last week. This week they are. So I think they're going to be able to get some pressure on whatever quarterback does play for the Giants. I think Robert Quinn right now, he has 17.5 sacks. He's going for the team franchise record. I think he may get it this week. He may get a couple of sacks here. And I do think the Bears are going to win this home game.
This is not two great teams facing each other. These are some of the bottom of the barrel teams who faced multiple injuries and multiple COVID outs. We got Mike Glennon most likely starting in this game. Don't expect great things out of him in this game. They don't even have their best receiver there. Kenny Golladay is fine, but he hasn't been putting up any numbers this season. And it's been more going to Kadarius Toney after Sterling Shepard went down. Saquon is about the best weapon that they do have, but his numbers are just trash this year compared to what we expected him to be going into this season. Meanwhile, the Bears have decided most likely they're going to go with Nick Foles in this game. David Montgomery is a solid running back. Like what I've seen out of him. Have more faith in what I think Nick Foles can do than what I think Mike Glennon could do based on the same level that these defenses and these offensive lines have. I think that at the end of the day, Nick Foles behind his O-line and having David Montgomery in the backfield, he'll be fine. And again, like Dominick said, they have a more dominant defense. Got to give it to the Bears. So they're at home. Give it to them. Next up, we got the 11-4 Kansas City Chiefs headed to Cincinnati to face the 9-6 Bengals. Dominick, who you got?
I love this matchup. This is going to be the best game of the week. I think it's going to be the highest scoring game of the week. Vegas feels the same way. Right now it's at a 51.5 point over under. I can see both of these teams getting over 30 points. We saw what the Bengals did last week. They just roughed up the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, they did that earlier in the year too. This week it was a lot easier because the Baltimore Ravens were on their 17th and 18th cornerback that they were starting. So they couldn't stop anything that Joe Burrow wanted to do. That's why he ended up with 525 yards and 4 touchdowns. Could have had a 5th touchdown, but it was called back on a penalty. This is going to, like I said, this is going to be a great game. Kansas City's defense is playing a lot better, but they are on the road in this one just because it's at home. And I think for some reason, I think this may be a special year for Cincinnati where they actually win the division, maybe actually, and make the playoffs. I'm not going to say they're going to win the Super Bowl, but I think for them, a special year would be making the playoffs. This win would go a long way. If they win this game, they clinch the division. They have to win one of their next 2 games to do that. And I do think it's going to happen here at home. So I'm going to take Cincinnati to beat the Chiefs.
Just like Dominic said, I absolutely think this is going to be the game of the week. These are 2 division-leading teams facing off, trying to stay atop their division, trying to shore up their spot in the playoffs, in particular the Bengals more than the Chiefs. That means that they're going to come in there fired up and ready to go. And the Bengals are going to be ready to kick some ass because they are at home. And they know what they're playing for. They know that they've got to get themselves into the playoffs. Kansas City at 11-4 have a much easier pathway to get in and, dominate that division. This is a little bit harder for me because I have more faith in the Chiefs. Obviously, that's who you expect to get it at the end of the day, just because I just feel like they got more solid weapons. But of late, watching what Joe Burrow can do with Jamar Chase, with what he's been doing with T. Higgins, with what they can do in the backfield with Joe Mixon when he's been healthy, it's just so fun to watch. I'm having a hard time here, you guys, because I like both these teams and I know what both of these teams are capable of doing on both sides of the ball. But at the end of the day, it's hard for me ever to pick against the Chiefs when everyone is healthy and on the field. So I got to give it to the Chiefs here. I just feel like they're going to get it done. Next up, we got the 8-7 Miami Dolphins headed to Tennessee to face the 10-5 Titans. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, Miami they won their first game. They lost their next 7. Now they've won their next 7. They're looking to be the first team in the playoffs to ever get into the playoffs after starting 1-7. They're already the first team to ever have a 7-game losing streak and a 7-game winning streak in the same season. I think this is where their winning streak ends. I know I said that the past couple weeks, but this is just a big letdown spot for them after a big win on Monday night against New Orleans. It was a big win. They won 20-3 or whatever the score was, but they didn't really look that good doing it. The Saints defense really kept them down. The Saints aren't as physical. Their defense is better, but they're not as physical as Tennessee. Tennessee's really going to get after them. They're going to play a lot of smash mouth football here, whether it be with Deontay Foreman or Ryan Tannehill. They're going to run the ball on defense. They're going to be able to stop the run game of Miami, make them one-dimensional, and I think they are going to be able to do that a little bit. This is in Tennessee. I know they're both teams are fighting for playoff position. Miami's fighting to get into playoffs. Tennessee's fighting to win their division and possibly get the number 1 seed, depending on how things work out. I think they're going to get a good chance to do it here, and unfortunately, because it's going to keep the Colts from winning the division, but I do think Tennessee is going to win this game and win the AFC South by doing so.
You guys, I gotta tell you, I love what Miami was capable of doing. When the team was 1-7, there were talks of going ahead and getting rid of Brian Flores, that he didn't have what it takes, that he's another one of these failure coaches under the coaching tree of Bill Belichick. See, here's proof. And then this team suddenly came together and went on a tear and rattled off 7 straight wins in a row, and now 8-7, and now on the verge of the playoffs. You want to talk about a hell of a turnaround? That's a hell of a turnaround. And it's so impressive to see this team do the things that they're capable of doing every single week. Even when players have been going out on COVID or going out on injuries, they haven't even had the same lineup every week, and they've still been able to put up the kind of numbers that they've been able to do and get these rattle off 7 straight wins. And not just against like dog competitors. I'm talking about good teams they have beaten along the way. That's hella impressive for this team. I'm so happy for Brian Flores to be getting the recognition that he deserves for being able to turn this team around the way that he's been capable of doing. Saying that, they're going to Tennessee, and Tennessee is trying to win their division and potentially lock up a number 1 seed, depending on how things shake up at the end. And having all of that on the line, Tennessee is going to be ready to rock and roll when it comes to facing the Dolphins. I love what the Dolphins have done. I love that they've rattled off these 7 wins in a row, but coming into Tennessee and facing the Titans the way that they've been playing lately, again, I love what Ryan Tannehill has been able, when A.J. Brown has been healthy. Also been impressed kind of with what Deontay Foreman's been able to do, considering that they've been without Derrick Henry all season long. Their defense finally got it together about week 4, week 5, they got it together and really started playing with more consistency, and that's been great to see. Man, I would love to see the Dolphins get this win here, but I gotta take the Titans in this game. Just absolutely convinced that they are going to lock up this division, giving it to Tennessee. Next up, we got the 8-7 Las Vegas Raiders headed to Indianapolis to face the 9-6 Colts. Dominick, who you got?
This game would have been a lot different if Carson Wentz was still out, but they did change the protocol, so he is most likely going to be back in this game. He's not a great quarterback, but he does have 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions this year. He only had 225 yards last week against the Patriots. But when you have Jonathan Taylor behind center in the run game, that's all you need. And besides that, when you have Jonathan Taylor, you don't need somebody who's going to throw for 300, 400 yards and give you a Joe Burrow type week, but you need somebody who's consistent, and that's exactly what he gives you, and that's what they need right now. It would have been much different if they would have had to turn to Sam Ehlinger or possibly Phillip Rivers back there this week. One thing the Raiders do not do, their defense has been playing better this year, but their defense is not good against the run. All of their starting linebackers right now are on the COVID list, so we'll have to see if they are able to come back or not. But with that said, I still think with Carson Wentz being back, with Jonathan Taylor being there, and with T.Y. Hilton and especially Michael Pittman being there as well, and their offensive line is back fully healthy now. Quentin Nelson is back and fully healthy. Darius Leonard, we don't know if he's going to make it back or not, but he should. So with all them coming back and them being pretty much at full strength, I really like the Colts here against the Raiders.
Raiders had a lot of crap to overcome this year. A lot of crap. The least of which is COVID. That's kind of sad, but yeah, the least of which is COVID. They still are going to be without Darren Waller. Originally it was the injury. Now it's the COVID. Most likely not going to clear in time. He's where we think Carson Wentz will. It's looking most likely that Darren Waller will not, just based on where he finally tested positive. Listen, it's hard for me to root for the Raiders because they're in the same division as my Broncos, but they've been able to string together some pretty impressive wins this season. But going against the Colts, the way that the Colts defense has been playing, the defense more than the offense, the way this defense has been playing has been impressive. That's why they're at 9-6 right now. Carson Wentz, if he's in there, which is what we're all aiming for, with this connection he has with Michael Pittman, with this connection that we're seeing starting to really flourish with T.Y. Hilton, but main thing above all else is this man, Jonathan Taylor. Goodness gracious. Jonathan Taylor is a sight to see every single week, even if he puts up just 1 or 2 touchdowns as opposed to 4 or 5. You never know, but he's going to give you 100 yards at least. And that's what I love about Indianapolis. I love Jonathan Taylor. Defense is solid. I can't give it to the Raiders, you guys. I can't. I absolutely am picking the Colts in this game. Next up, we got the 2-13 Jacksonville Jaguars headed to New England to face the 9-6 Patriots. Dominick, who you got?
Give me the Patriots. It's Bill Belichick against a rookie quarterback, and a rookie quarterback on probably the worst team in the league. Patriots are 17-point favorites right now, and I think they could probably win this by 27 if they wanted to.
I cannot, in good faith, pick the Jaguars in this game. I feel so bad for this kid, Trevor Lawrence. I hope they get a good coach in there. I hope they get rid of Trent Baalke and give him a new GM as well. There's so much potential in this team that is not manifested because of all the nonsense that they had to go through. But going against the New England Patriots, with the way their defense is, how solid this offense is playing, I ain't no way in hell I'm picking the Jaguars, taking the Patriots. Next up, we got the 11-4 Tampa Bay Buccaneers headed to New York to face the 4-11 Jets. Dominic, who you got?
Again, Tampa Bay, they're a little depleted, but they still came out and crushed Carolina last week. I think that was more based on what Carolina had to offer them, which was absolutely nothing. They are going to be most likely without Mike Evans again. They will be without Chris Godwin. They're going to be without Leonard Fournette, so they're going to have to rely on the run game as well as some guy named Tom Brady, who I think, if I'm not mistaken, went 199th in the draft, if I remember right. But I just think, obviously, they have way too much here. Their defense, even though it's a little depleted right now, they are still much better than the Jets offense. The Jets offense has nothing for them. The run game, if they can use Michael Carter, still not going to do much against this Tampa Bay defense, which is great against the run. So even though it's on the road and they don't play as good on the road, I still think they're going to win this game by probably a touchdown, maybe 10 points.
It's the Jets, you guys. Stop it. It's the Jets. I don't need to say a whole lot more. Zach Wilson, another one of these QBs. I hope in the future that he continues to do well. I feel like he'll have an opportunity to develop under Robert Saleh next season. But they've been plagued with injuries. Their offensive line hasn't been that great. The defense has been spotty at best. Again, love Quentin Williams, but haven't seen much else out of the rest of this defense. Secondary is trash. Tampa Bay, another team, they're plagued with injuries, but they're playing somehow every week, despite losing players to COVID or losing players to injuries. Tom Brady's going to get it done. He'll give a rat's ass who he has in the backfield with him. He don't care what receivers are out there. He going to get it done. He has AB out there, and he has Gronk back. He'll be fine. Taking the Buccaneers here. Next up, we got the 8-7 Philadelphia Eagles headed to Washington to face the 6-9 football team. Dominic, who you got?
Washington's coming off probably their ugliest game in a long time. It was obviously the worst game against Dallas ever. They lost by the most points that they've ever lost to in that rivalry. The Eagles are coming off a good game where they won by 24 points, but they did it in an ugly fashion. The game was only 3-3 at halftime, and then they ended up pulling away in the second half. We don't know if Miles Sanders is going to be in this game. If he doesn't play the rest of the season, he'll be the player with the most yards from scrimmage without a touchdown this year, which is it's crazy to see. As much as they've been running the ball lately, he has just not gotten a touchdown. They're going to continue to run the ball here. We don't know if Montez Sweat is going to be back in this game. We know they're not going to have Chase Young for Washington either. We don't know what they're going to be able to do. They're not going to be able to stop Jalen Hurts, at least from running the ball. He's not really a great thrower yet, but when he does throw it to Devontae Smith as well as Dallas Goedert, and those are two very good options. I think it's going to be a very close game because these division games usually are. Washington is a better team than they showed last week, but they also got blown out by 10 points against the Eagles just 2 weeks ago. So I do think that this game is going to play much the same way that one did. I don't think Washington's going to get out in front. I think this one's just going to stay close the whole way through, and I think the Eagles are going to win the game.
Division rivals, it'll definitely be a close game for sure. But the Washington is decimated on that defense. And they lost a lot of players to injury on that offense as well. So this is a team that's really struggling. If J.D. McKissick was still there, I would feel a little bit differently. But them just leaning on Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin, who's been injured off and on, Taylor Heineke, I can't pick them in this game because I just feel like the Eagles have more weapons. I trust Jalen Hurts. I know Miles Sanders hasn't scored, but that doesn't mean he won't put up at least 90 yards a game at minimum. Devonta Smith, I still like watching this kid. I know what he's capable of doing when he's given the opportunity to get open. And with this way that the Washington's defense has been playing of late, again, mostly because they've been decimated through injuries and through COVID. And that's why they looked so poor last week. They were playing with ridiculous amount of backup players due to COVID or whatever. With them changing the restrictions on how fast players can come back, that may change in some respect, but I'm still not expecting them to be able to get the win. So taking the Eagles here, even though that they're in Washington. Next up, we got the 11-4 Los Angeles Rams headed to Baltimore to face the 8-7 Ravens. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, the Rams looked pretty good last week. They beat Minnesota, pretty much knocked Minnesota out of the playoffs. They're going on the road again here all the way across the country. I still like the Rams here. I know Matthew Stafford hasn't been playing up to the level that everybody expected him to this year, but he's still getting them to 11 wins and leading the division, which is good to see. He had 3 interceptions last week, but luckily it didn't cost him. I don't think he's going to be able to throw 3 interceptions this week, even if he wanted to, because the Ravens' secondary is so banged up that, like we said earlier, they were playing like 16th and 17th string players last week, and they're going to be doing the same thing here. Lamar Jackson did come back to practice today, so it looks like he may be back in this game. But even if he is back, he's not going to be fully healthy. He's not going to be able to run quite as much. He's not going to be able to run away from Aaron Donald as much as he'll need to. With the offense that the Rams have here and the defense being solid, if not good, I do think the Rams are going to be able to come across the country and clinch their division this week.
The Baltimore Ravens, they've been, again, it's another team. COVID has really ravaged some teams more than others. Ravens, unfortunately, has been one of those who not only suffered a tremendous amount of injuries earlier in the season, they also had a lot of players go down due to COVID, and it's come back and bit them in the ass. This team is now only 8-7 with whatever expectations most of us had in preseason. None of that has lived up. And mainly, again, that's just because they've been decimated with injuries. They're going to be facing these Rams. These Rams have something to prove. They're playing in a very, very tough division, which is surprising for me to say about the NFC West, but this is a really tough division. And I know that Matthew Stafford is going to want to give it all he got to get this team into the playoffs for more reasons than one, but the main one to prove that it's not a fluke. And he really is that dude after spending so many years in Detroit and people dismissing him and the capabilities that he has. So if he can lock up this division, which I feel like he can do, Cooper Kupp is the man. And then he's got OBJ, who's been stepping up recently. He's got a solid run game with Sony Michel. Then I started to see more out of Darnell Henderson. This is going to be a good game because Baltimore isn't going to roll over and play dead. They're going to give it everything they got. They're, again, still playing for their playoff life as well. But at the end of the day, I just got more faith in what these Rams can do. And again, this is a great defense as well. It's another one that they went through some troubles getting players back due to COVID, but everybody's back now. Definitely got to give this game to the Rams. Next up, we got the 7-8 Denver Broncos headed to Los Angeles to face the 8-7 Chargers. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, the Chargers are coming off an ugly loss last week against Houston. They were expected to win by everybody to stay in the playoff hunt. They're still in the playoff hunt, but it's not nearly as good now as it was before. I do think they're going to be able to beat Denver here because they are going up against Drew Lock. And let's face it, when you go up against Drew Lock, if you don't win, that's worse than losing to Houston. But I do think that they're going to give up a lot of rush yards here because they are still the worst rush defense in the league, even with Joey Bosa being back. But I expect on the other side, I expect Herbert to light up this Denver defense with Keenan Allen, with Mike Williams back as well, with Jalen Guyton back also. I really love what they have here on offense on the on the Chargers. And I don't think that the Broncos have the defense to shut it down. I know they did shut it down and they really beat them up when it was in Denver. I think that Herbert remembers what happened there when they lost the game 41-23 or whatever the score was. I don't think they want that to happen again because then they'll definitely be out of the playoffs. So I think on top of the revenge factor, which I don't really believe in, I think that they know they're playing for their playoff lives, and I think they're going to show up here and win this game.
If this was Teddy Bridgewater against Justin Herbert, this game would be phenomenal. It would be superb, and it would be very hard for me to pick who I think would win. I have absolutely no faith whatsoever with Drew Lock. My team, my beautiful Broncos, have a solid running game in Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. But Drew Lock as a quarterback, he's going to get him. Listen, I'm not saying that he won't score a touchdown because he's got great receivers there. Broncos has some phenomenal receivers. But I do not have the faith to feel like, he can get over the hump when it comes to what I know the Chargers and Justin Herbert can do when he has both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams there healthy. And especially, they got Austin Eckler back as well. There's no way. Listen, Chargers and Broncos are still technically both in the race, but the Chargers have way better of a shot of getting in. They don't have to have so many situations to happen in order for them to get in. That means that they're going to play their behinds off to get themselves in at this point. So that being said, I know that they're going to come in there fired up, especially after that devastating loss that they suffered last week, giving this one to the Chargers. Next up, we got the 4-11 Houston Texans headed to San Francisco to face the 8-7 49ers. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, I think Houston, coming off of that big high from their win last week, I think they're going to really come crashing down to earth here. It is going to be Trey Lance behind center, most likely, not Jimmy G. So that could lead to a lot of weird things going on here. I think they're obviously going to run the ball a lot more than they do now, which is hard to say because they do run the ball a lot. I am going to take the 49ers in this game, but I am also going to say that if David Culley doesn't get at least one vote for Coach of the Year, something's wrong.
Absolutely, because my goodness, the situation this poor man had to walk into dealing with the Houston Texans and that whole front office situation. Don't get me started on this team. They're starting Davis Mills this week, of course, and he has Brandon Cooks there, who's been solid. You know, I give him his credit or whatever. Rex Burkhead looked good last week. This team actually won last week. They have pieces to get wins. There needs to be some other elements that need to happen there in order to change certain dynamics for this team to move progress in the direction that they need to. 49ers have decided to go with Trey Lance as the starter. I think this is a smart decision on their part. It means that there's going to be more of a ground and pound type game. And I know that Trey Lance is more capable of scrambling than Jimmy G is. Hopefully that means he'll be able to throw on a one because he's got such good receivers in Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, one of the best tight ends in the league, and George Kittle. Come on, you guys. How can I pick Houston? I know I didn't pick Houston last week, and they embarrassed me by beating the Chargers, but this ain't the Chargers. This is the 49ers. Have more faith in them, giving this to San Francisco. Next up, we got the 10-5 Arizona Cardinals headed to Dallas to face the 11-4 Cowboys. Dominic, who you got?
10-5 or not, this team is on the slide in Arizona. They don't have DeAndre Hopkins, and it really shows. Their defense isn't playing as good. Kyler Murray, I don't know if he's injured or something, or if it's just the Cliff Kingsbury late season factor that they always seem to fade at the end of the year, but it seems to be happening again here. On the other hand, Dallas just put up 56 points against Washington last week. After a season of Dak Prescott not looking good, everybody thought maybe he was still injured. He looked really good last week. I think he's going to look really good again this week, being at home, and I do think Dallas is going to win this one.
I don't know what's going on with Arizona. Are you telling me that one receiver goes down and the whole team falls apart? And don't get me wrong, it's Nuke of all receivers. That's a huge loss for any team, but an entire team just start to fall the hell apart because you lose one receiver? That's ridiculous to me. They rattled off 3 losses in a row. They've looked disgusting in all of those losses. It's sad to see the way this team is playing lately. I'm so disappointed in them. Meanwhile, the Cowboys last week just mollywopped the hell out of Washington. Part of that we got to blame on COVID because Washington had so many players out due to COVID, but I'm not going to just give it to that because the Cowboys just was so impressive on this offense and how good they look. He's got some of the best receivers in the league. He's got Zeke and then Tony Pollard. Everybody, talks about how great Zeke is. Tony Pollard is the man there. Even though Zeke might have the bigger contract, Tony Pollard is the dude to watch when it comes to that running game. With a healthy Dak playing there at home in Dallas, they're already cocky over the win that they got last week. And the way that the Cardinals are on a skid and will not have Nuke back this season, got to get this one to the Cowboys. Next up, we got the 5-10 Carolina Panthers headed to New Orleans to face the 7-8 Saints. Dominic, who you got?
Both of these teams are bad. Carolina's so bad, they're actually going back to Sam Darnold now. They brought him off of IR just to start him here. We know that Trevor Siemian as well as Taysom Hill are both now off the COVID list, so we'll have to see which one's going to start. As long as it's not Ian Book, that's all I care about. Alvin Kamara is going to be the best player in this game, obviously, so I do think that the Saints are going to be able to run the ball down the throat of the Carolina Panthers, and I do think the Saints are going to win this one and stay at least relevant a little bit in the playoffs.
Carolina's trash. I don't give a rat's ass who they put at quarterback at this point. I really don't. We thought it was going to be Cam. That didn't work out. And then PJ Walker, and that didn't work out. And now we're back to Sam Darnold again. Listen, he got pulled previously. So we already know it's not going to work out. It's a terrible team. And I'm so disappointed in what I've been seeing out of DJ more so than Robbie Anderson, because what I've seen is nothing. They're just a sad, pathetic team. Meanwhile, New Orleans should have both Taysom and Trevor Siemian back. I imagine they're going to try to go with Taysom maybe at this point. I'm not 100% sure, but I know they can rely on that running game because Alvin Kamara can put up numbers for you. So if I had to choose between a garbage team and a so-so team, I'm going to pick the so-so team, taking the Saints in this game. Next up, we got the 2-12-1 Detroit Lions headed to Seattle to face the 5-10 Seahawks. Dominick, who you got?
Yeah, Russell Wilson, I don't know what's wrong with him. His hand still's not right. We obviously know he has a connection with Tyler Lockett. He's building one with DK Metcalf over the past year, and I think obviously they're the best trio in this game. But there's something about Detroit. They play hard here. They play hard all the time. They barely lost the game last week. They've won a couple games this year, including blowing out Arizona a couple weeks ago at home. For some reason, I don't like what is happening with this Seattle team. Detroit has a chance to get DeAndre Swift back in this game. Even if not, they're going to have Craig Reynolds in this game, who's been playing really good as the running back here. So I hate to say it. I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell. I love you, but I'm going to have to disappoint you and your girl Mina Kimes here, but I'm going to have to pick the Lions with the upset.
Oh, my goodness, you guys. Seattle was so bad. I think they rushed Russell Wilson back. I think Russell Wilson also rushed himself back with his finger injury. And it's showing because there's no way this hand is fully healed with the way that these balls are dying well short of his receiver or way past his receiver. It's so painful to watch how bad this team is this year because I don't get it. I've never seen this in the past. Meanwhile, Detroit, even in losses, this team is fun to watch. Why? Because they're not getting blown the hell out every week. They're putting up some really, really good disheartening games when they lose by a field goal or a point or something like that. Because they're just so fun to watch, which wasn't what I expected. One of my favorite players this season is Amon-Ra St. Brown. I know I go on and on about the St. Brown families, but now Amon-Ra has now become my favorite of those. And I am seeing what he can do now with Jared Goff. Really fun to watch. So much is going to happen with this team in the future with Dan Campbell there as the head coach. If they stick with that, this team's got so much potential. Can Seattle overcome the injury of Russell Wilson and the way that he's been playing consistently enough to get the win there at home in Seattle? I'm going to go with yes in this case, but it's going to be a close one. It's going to be way, way closer than people are expecting because, again, Detroit is 2-12-1. You expect them to roll over and play dead, and that's not what they do. They're going to put up a dog fight here in Seattle, but at the end of the day, I just feel like the Seahawks can get it done. Next up, we got the 7-8 Minnesota Vikings headed to Green Bay to face the 12-3 Packers. Dominick, who you got?
Kirk Cousins in prime time. Give me the Packers.
I feel like we don't have to say much else, you guys. Kirk Cousins in prime time is pure D stinking garbage. And they're going against the 12-3 Packers. And the way Aaron Rodgers has been on a tear of late, with a healthy Aaron Jones, with a healthy Devontae Adams, with MVS there, with A.J. Dillon popping up out of nowhere. Great team, fun to watch in prime time. Gotta give it to the Packers. And last up, we got our Monday night matchup. We got the 7-8 Cleveland Browns headed to Pittsburgh to face the 7-1 Steelers. Dominic, who you got?
Yeah, Alice, you and I were talking about this game before we came on air, and it's funny. I was listening to a podcast earlier, and they were talking about how that they really like the Browns in this game, but we know that after the mollywhopping that Pittsburgh took last week against the Chiefs, that Big Ben was going to come out and do something dramatic like he always is one to do, and he did that today by saying that this is probably going to be his last home game as a Pittsburgh Steeler. That way he can get the all the feelings up there and stuff. With that said, I think he did it obviously to get the team motivated and to get the fans behind him and get the support. Obviously, Cleveland's not going to care if it's his last home game or not. I'm really disappointed in Cleveland this year, and I think I'm going to be even more disappointed after this week when they lose again to Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh is playing at home. Big Ben pulling on the heartstrings of his teammates, of the fans. So you know they're going to have a hell of a turnout in this game where they're only a mediocre team. But you pull on the heartstrings, you're going to get a next level type game out of your teammates. You know that because they're going to play for you. Meanwhile, the Browns, they're just all over the place, you guys. Some weeks I'm impressed by the wins they get, and then they have a loss that just makes no sense for how badly they got beat, considering the fact that everybody was out there and healthy. Baker Mayfield is playing through a ridiculous amount of injuries. He should not be playing right now, but he's forcing himself to play because he's on a contract year, and it's showing because he's really, really, in some cases, I feel like he's hurting the team, pushing himself through when he should let someone else start until he's fully allowed himself to heal up, because some of these passes he throws are just so off, it's ridiculous. But he's got a solid run game there with Nick Chubb and Dearness Johnson, the little rookie that I've seen numbers out of. But come on now. They're playing in Pittsburgh. Big Ben pulling on them heartstrings with Najee Harris in the backfield, with Chase and Deontay Darius as receivers. Definitely giving this one to the Steelers. Big Ben going out in glorious fashion. Well, you guys, that's all of our matchups. Dominic, we're in championship week, aren't we?
We better be, because if you're not in championship week, your season's doing something wrong, because you should not be playing the last week of the season, no matter how many weeks the season goes.
Absolutely. And saying that, give me my starters for the championship game.
I'm going to, after disappointing you by saying that the Chargers are going to beat your Broncos, I'm going to give you a little bit of a bone here. Like I said, the Chargers have the worst run defense in the league. They just gave 130 yards and 2 touchdowns to Rex Burkhead last week. Did anybody even know Rex Burkhead was still in the league? This week they're going up against the Broncos. They have a double-headed threat there, but obviously Javonte Williams has taken over from Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon had negative yards last week. Javonte Williams barely had any, but he still had some, and he is the lead running back there. Against this Chargers defense, make sure you start Javonte Williams this week.
Good luck to everybody in their championship week. Hope you guys get your W's. Well, you guys, that's all the time that we have this week. Want to thank everybody again for listening. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at TheNFLGirl320. Dominic, where can they follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter at EnvisionFF.
You can read more of my thoughts on SheKnowsProFootball.com. Dominic, where can they read your work?
You can read my work at The Athletic, at rotoballer.com, and at expandtheboxscore.com.
That's all the time we have, you guys. See you back here next week.